welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. You've been doing this for years, but it doesn't mean you don't hate it. You think back to the other jobs you've held that you hated, working in a fast food restaurant, scrubbing toilets, that time you spent in the army being told what to think and what to feel. You hated all of those jobs, but you didn't hate any of them as much as you hate this one. Still, it doesn't mean that you're not here, deeply embedded within Zone France, with your merry band of stalkers at your side. Supposedly, Zone France is one of the safer, anomalous zones that appeared on the surface of the Earth in the last 13 years. That hasn't stopped you from losing several companions to it, however. You're sat in one of the so-called oases, apparently one of the safest areas within the anomalous zones, as the replicas, the mutants, the anomalies, the inorganisms are less likely to appear here. It's not impossible they will, but they are less likely to, and so that offers some small respite. It has given you enough time to examine all of the artefacts that you and your companions have been acquiring during your little trek that's taken you several days, or maybe it's several weeks. Time is very difficult to measure in the zones, as the sun doesn't necessarily come up every single day. The sky does not always clear of cloud. It can be very, very difficult to read where you are, how far you've gone into the zone, or indeed how long you've been there. The Institute don't know you're here, and they probably wouldn't be terribly happy to find out that you were. Your relationship with the Institute is an odd dichotomy. They would shoot you as soon as see you if they saw you entering a zone via the border at Toulouse. And yet, inevitably, you know that when you sell your artifacts back in the border town, they will make their way back to the Institute by some manner of means, probably via a black market seller. Then they will put them to some sort of a use. So, your greatest enemy is also your employer. You only lost one man on this journey into the zone, and that is quite a good record, all things considered. He was unfortunate enough to fall afoul of what the locals are calling a magnetic fountain. This anomaly is known for being magnetized to certain fluids or certain substances. Almost every magnetic fountain is different. Some are drawn to particular metals. Some have been known to be drawn to the vitreous fluid in people's eyeballs. In the case of your companion, as he stood in a rather innocuous-looking pile of trash, he didn't even have enough time to scream before he was whisked off his feet, dragged several meters down the road, half embedded into a wall, and by the time you had snared him and pulled him free, you found that all of the blood had been sucked out of him into this anomaly, leaving him a marble-white husk. You wouldn't have bothered retrieving his body had he not had several important items on his person, but it did make the salvage worthwhile. So now you and your friends need to make your way out of the oasis of calm and back to the normal side of Toulouse. You look towards the horizon and see what anomalies you can survey through your binoculars. You check against your map. That building shouldn't be there, so you'd better avoid that. That puddle in the distance, more of a lake, seems to be made of quicksilver. Definitely do not go anywhere near that. Down that alley, not that far away, there's a shimmering heat in the air. It's not a hot day. It's cold. It's been cold for days and days. Could be a mosquito mange. Certainly do not pass through that. You make certain notes on your map, plot a course that you know is going to change at least 20 times before you reach the border town, and stand up. Your companions begin to follow, all of whom have grim looks upon their faces. They are resolute. Some of them have trekked this path many a time before. For others, this is their first journey, and they should feel lucky to have reached an oasis in one piece. You give them a good look over. Some anomalies can be triggered with a nut or a screw being thrown into it, and then they are inactive for a period of time, allowing for people to pass through. You make another cursory glance across your crew of stalkers. Some anomalies need things bigger than screws and nuts thrown in to deactivate them. You pick out the weakest members of your group. You know that sacrifices will have to be made for the need of the stalking crew, for the need of your artifacts, if you're going to get any wealth, any respect out of this at all. not all of you are going to come back. This is a review of Stalker, a sci-fi role-playing game, or the sci-fi role-playing game. It is a role-playing game based on a Russian novel by the name of Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. It was released during the Cold War, and there's a movie of the same name, in fact. Now, this role-playing game was initially published in 2008 in Finland, and it was even reported in the major Finnish newspaper, the Helsingin Sanomat, I'm probably mispronouncing that terribly, as a culture event of 2008. A role-playing game, a culture event of 2008, which just goes to show the Finnish know which side their bread is buttered. It is reviewed on the back. Apparently a typical review of this game is fucking brilliant. I don't know whether the tabloids in Finland often use terminology like that, but I would be quite happy to state that I do think, the gentleman gamer thinks that Stalker is a fucking brilliant setting. It is a fucking brilliant game. So, this testimony, whether it was made up or not, can now stand. It's released by Burger Games, it's been translated into English in 2012, and it's a perfectly solid, excellent, rich and deep setting for a role-playing game. Now, you may have heard of Stalker before, most likely because of the video game Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, which is very, very loosely based on this, very loosely indeed. If you wanted to play this and were expecting that, you would probably be disappointed because the two games aren't that similar. Boris Strugatsky sold the rights to this game apparently to another company that was going to make a role-playing game out of it, according to the preface in this, but no one's ever seen hide nor hair of that game, so as far as we know, this is the only role-playing game based on a Roadside Picnic, and I think it shares certain elements with Metro 2033. It's also got a very apocalyptic feel to it. If you like that kind of Mad Max Fallout feel to a role-playing game with a certain level of alien thrown in, then this is a good game for you. Now, the meat and bone of the game. I'm actually going to go on to rules first. It uses a game system referred to as the flow system, which, interestingly, is diceless. I know what you're thinking, that's not a role-playing system, that's a storytelling system, but hear me out. You build your character up with basic abilities and attributes, and most conflict resolution, most task resolution, is dealt with through roleplay. The better you roleplay, the more likely you are to succeed. But it also encompasses what you involve in the roleplay. So, for instance, if you're trying to fix a car, and you describe that you've got the mechanic skill, well, that's a success that goes towards it. If you have also picked up a toolbox before then, you get a bonus towards it. If you are doing it in good daylight, you get a bonus towards it. If you encourage the rest of your companions to help you out, you get a bonus towards it, and so on. And so it becomes more of a point-spending exercise and makes character creation very, very important indeed. It's probably a game that appeals to party balance, the people that like that, because you need a balance of talents in order to actually survive the zones. But I think it's a good system. It's a system where you can just spend a point from an ability in order to automatically succeed, but you don't get that point back until much later on. So that you can use that in a similar style to fate points or luck points. And if something is completely arbitrary, it does say the GM can just roll a die, or the player can, and the higher it is, the worse the outcome. So I think it's a nice, innovative, sleek system, maybe not for the old school crowd, as they refer to themselves, who like to roll a lot of dice in the Tunnels and Trolls style, but this game isn't Tunnels and Trolls. This game is very much storyteller driven, and so there's a lot of narrative, a lot of onus on the player to play their character appropriately, and give their character enough depth to actually succeed at tasks. So you've got to really put the description in. This may put some players off, I can understand why. Some people like to default to the dice. If, let's say, you are trying to make a law check in a role-playing game, but you're not a lawyer in real life, you will default to rolling dice. You won't just make up some legalese, because it's quite possible that some of the other players may decry you. That's not encouraged in this game. It basically encourages you to blag and bullshit and make it sound believable, because that will give you bonuses to passing. And so, if you're not terribly hot on the description, this game may pose some difficulties, the system will. Now, The system is probably the least important part of this role-playing game. The most important part is the setting, which, as I say, is fucking brilliant. Last time I will drop the F-bomb in this role-playing game review. The setting just grabs me. 13 years ago, 6 anomalous zones appeared across the surface of the Earth. It was in an event referred to as the Visitation. Was it God? Well, was it aliens? Was it some kind of Cold War mishap that occurred? But across the globe, in various locales, in the USA, in Canada, in France, in Russia, in China, and Japan, there are zones of different radiuses ranging from 57 kilometers diameter through to, I think, the largest, which is in Sisu in China, having 122 kilometers in diameter. And each of these anomalous zones is completely different, or at least, well, they are just completely alien within. Hundreds of thousands of people within the zones died when this happened overnight. Some people just disappeared completely. The way of life completely changed around these zones. Very quickly they were cordoned off by a government agency, a global government agency referred to as the Institute, that has dedicated itself to examining these zones. In some cases, entire armies were moved into these zones to see whether they could sort out the problems, and they fell afoul of so many anomalies and inorganisms that some of them just completely disappeared, got cut off from radio contact. In a rare turn of events, I'm going to read some parts from the book because I think this book is so well written it deserves it. So the Klamath Falls zone in USA, diameter 101k. The zone is on the border of California and Oregon, just south of the town of Klamath Falls. It is mostly wilderness, rural areas, and small urban pockets. The western edge climbs up to the slopes of the Cascade Mountain Range. The area is swept by large and powerful dynamic anomalies. Some changed life forms have crossed the border and are believed to have come from underground caves. Volcanic activity is now frequent. In Canada, the southern parts are city proper, the northern parts are suburbs, farmland and wilderness. Unbroken anomalous area, but with rumours of life in the north, including mutated survivors of the anomaly. Replicas sometimes cross the border, I'll get onto replicas, but there are no proven sightings of other creatures. The zone was partially formed up over the mining town of Harmont. Unlike most Borderlands, the remaining part of the town was not abandoned and gets by on slim government subsidies and little tourism. So we also have France, which is that's full of artifacts. It's one favoured by stalkers. You've got, I think, Japan, which is absolutely racked with distortions of time and space, the mingling of night and day, areas of light and shadow. The Chinese one is covered by colourful corrosive clouds that often move against the wind, making satellite imaging and almost the entire zone nearly inaccessible. Each of the zones is slightly different and allows for different role-playing opportunities because of what's inside the zone that is so important. Sometimes the Institute may hire stalkers, but more likely than not they will be trying to stop you from getting in. And stalkers are those intrepid types who want to cross the border. Now, whether it's to find relatives who they think are still alive, maybe it's because they've been hired by relatives who want these stalkers to find their loved ones. Maybe they're there to try and find artifacts. Artifacts are sometimes artifacts from the real world, others artifacts that seemingly were created within these zones. And they include, let's see, I've got a few here. The pin, a 10cm stick that is sharp at one end which occasionally twinkles with light. Just touching the pin does nothing, but squeezing it will produce complex and changing patterns of light either on the pin itself or in the air around its tip. The significance of those is a mystery to the scientific community. The so-so, a cylinder about 10 centimetres long and as thick as a man's thumb with powerful opposite electric charges at its ends. It is safe to handle by gripping the middle. A so-so produces sufficient energy to power an electric car and it never runs out. They multiply by dividing when exposed to gamma radiation. So there's all sorts of artifacts that have just spontaneously appeared in these zones that stalkers are sent to find because of how valuable they are. Of course, entering the zones exposes you to multiple dangers. I mentioned the replicas that are very literally replicas of people who were in the zones when the visitation happened. They are almost impervious to harm. They almost exactly live out the lives of the people that they have replaced. They are not in and of themselves dangerous or aggressive, but they are certainly not the original version. Sometimes they make their way out of the zones and try to reconnect with old friends and family. Most of them can't speak, most of them just live in a sort of simulacrum fashion and walk around and perform the tasks that their predecessor once did. No one knows where they've come from, what their motive is, why they're doing what they're doing. They can't be reasoned with, they can't be stopped. They drive people mad by just reminding them of who they've lost, who has died, and they're completely passive. If you try and stop them, they may try and push you away with an inordinate amount of strength, enough to break necks with just a snap of an arm. As in their arm snaps your neck. Now, the major issue of travelling into the zones is the anomalies, and there's so many of them detailed in this book, and there's various systems for creating artefacts and anomalies of your own. I won't describe all of them, but some of them are absolutely lethal, some of them less so. Spitting Devil's Cabbage, a translucent rosette that can be up to 1 metre in diameter. Inside is a caustic mass under high pressure, and even a small jolt is enough to make the rosette open up, spraying the caustic mass everywhere. Once it is discharged, it is safe for a while, closing down slowly. Some researchers have suggested that the cabbage could also be an inorganism. I won't cover them in this review, but inorganisms are great fun. Witch's Jelly, a grey mass of viscous fluid and dense gas that constantly burns with a blue flame, dissolves all living and some dead matter. The Mosquito Mange, a high-gravity region. Large mosquito manges are easy to recognise by their environmental effects and the distortion of light due to air pressure. Branching, narrow or elongated areas may be very difficult to make out. There's also the Meat Grinder. This invisible force awaits until it can throw someone into the air, twisting and slashing. After discharging, it is harmless for a while. It's very difficult to see, but there are sometimes remains of humans and animals in the vicinity. Essentially, it just hurls you up in the air, twists you about, and rips you limb from limb. This game can be lethal, and so it advocates a certain degree of common sense, and says if the players at any point start to move their characters through a zone without making due care and process and examining where they're going, by all means throw an anomaly at them, because in a sense this is like a dungeon crawl on the surface where everywhere is lined with environmental traps and other. And so if they're not paying attention, then they should reap the consequences of it, because the rewards, if they survive these anomalies and these inorganisms and these mutants that live in the zones and various other things, can be vast. However, the penalties for dying, well, for losing it, are often death or great mutilation. I'm particularly fond of the idea that this game can be compared to Cube. If you remember the movie, I think a Canadian movie, in which various rooms were trapped in certain ways, it's much the same as this, except this is of course based in cities or rural environments, and you can't quite tell what's going on. Just when you think you've got the perfect plan of triggering all the anomalies around you so you don't fall into them, the next one is triggered by a change in air pressure, or the next one is triggered because it only triggers when it picks up female pheromones or something like that going past them. There should be no hard and fast rule for avoiding all anomalies, but there should be characters in this game, and there are some stalkers of ill repute who seem to have the best idea of how best to survive a zone. I love the idea that in some of these zones there are cars where the radios are still playing. They are playing as if time never stopped there. The DJs are still talking. Music that has never been heard before is somehow playing through the radios, despite the fact the cars themselves are rusted beyond recognition. In other zones, plants have grown vociferously, whereas all artificial constructs have just decayed rapidly. And vice versa in some others. In some cases, living matter, as soon as it triggers an anomaly or walks into a specific type of zone, will just rapidly shrivel up, and the land around that person will change. Buildings appear out of nowhere. Photographs taken of one place may change once you've got the photos outside into the border zone. My point of describing Stalker like this is because it's very much a blank canvas. This is a world that you can set a role-playing game in, and you can do so much with it. It really is such a fantastic game, and can really take players by surprise, especially if you've got players who don't mind a bit of character lethality. I think it's something to be encouraged for for mature role players, people who can handle a bit of death and will think through their actions before they take them. But you can build up so much around Stalker that I sincerely implore you to take a look at it. Look it up on drivethrurpg. It's not expensive. You can get it print bound and mailed to you, like this one, and it's in good quality too. And do let me know what you think. I personally think it is a knockout game of the last few years, and it's a great pity that less people know about it. Thank you for watching.